think a bunch of pre-made CSS and JavaScript technically. But and the point of Bootstrap pretty much is one of their main goals is to make it super easy, or at least easier than it was, to make your website responsive, which pretty much means making it look good on mobile. So your website can resize, and whether it's on a big screen or on a little phone or even maybe a smartwatch, you can make it look good and not like everything's kind of smushed together. And it's also useful when you're prototyping and or impressing a boss or something like that, because it has a lot of uh a lot of components, a lot of CSS classes that are easy to use and make your website look good without that much effort. So even I say here, even a back-end developer can do it. Whoops. Because it's pretty much just about true. I mean, yeah, it's pretty easy to use for the most part. There's still a little bit of a learning curve type thing, but it's still pretty easy to understand once you get going. And again, it's for quick wins. And in case you didn't know, dsucomputer.club, which is our official website, uses Bootstrap. So all this you see, most of it is Bootstrap. There might be a little bit of custom CSS. There used to be a lot of bit, like all these floating triangles. I think that's custom CSS. But like these buttons, that's Bootstrap. This nav bar, Bootstrap. If we go over here, we got these buttons. These are Bootstrap alerts, kind of used as kind of like messages. We got Bootstrap cards, all this good stuff. Bootstrap, and this is barely scratching the surface of what's offered in Bootstrap. Like all this, and you see this website looks pretty good, right? I'd say so myself. Thank you. I made this website anyway. Uh, let's get back over here. So how do we bootstrap? Well, first of all, you include the Bootstrap CSS, which is kind of explained over in this screenshot. You can't really read it. You can go to their documentation. Bootstrap has very good documentation. You can pretty much search up Bootstrap docs and it'll take you right there. This is all in there. Basically, you copy and paste this CSS link, and that will use Bootstrap's CDN server, which if you use that, then it's cached, so it might be a little bit faster than if you have it stored on your web server as just the code. But you can do that if you want to customize the code or whatever. You also have like a customizer on their website, but anyway. We also need to include jQuery and the Bootstrap JavaScript, which includes something called Popper, which I believe if you include their bundle, it's included with it, so you don't have to worry about it, which is this tag. You just slap that in your head and it works. Technically, you only need the JavaScript if you're making things move, or sometimes with animations and stuff like that. Um, I would include it just because it's not too much overhead. And uh, if you ever want to use any of those elements or animations, it's pretty neat. Like the one that's on uses like the navbar and animation, which we'll get to that bit. But yeah, keep going backwards. So now let's get into the basics of how to bootstrap. And again, here's a link to their documentation. A lot of this, in fact, we're just spend a little bit more time in the slides here, and then we're gonna go over the documentation. And I'm also gonna code a little bit of Bootstrap for you guys to get a little somewhat less of these stale slides that don't move and stuff. But anyway, so first of all, breakpoints. So being a responsive front-end framework, Bootstrap has what's called breakpoints. which if you remember, if you've taken, is that Web App 2 where we do responsive design, or is it Web App 1? It might be Web App. Yeah, I think it's Web App 1 because Web App 2 is all backend stuff pretty much. I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. But anyway, so you remember all that CSS you needed to do all these breakpoints, like at this screen size, I want this to be this wide, this many pixels or whatever. Well, that's pretty much all gone. And what you do instead is you have special classes. Now, this isn't a class, this is just a specifier pretty much. And you'll see this later on. But basically, they have these 6 breakpoints. And whenever a class has like one of these tacked onto it, that class only applies when the screen is this size. And of course, it goes from bottom all the way to the largest. So small to large. And we'll get into exactly what this means. Although not all Bootstrap classes use breakpoints, but you'll see which ones use it. So here's the grid. You can already see there's these breakpoints. So Bootstrap has a grid system, which basically allows you to use rows and columns to kind of like set out a layout of your web page. So over here is a very basic grid system over here. There is 12 columns per row. So you can have up to 12. Well, I think you can squeeze more in there, but it might start to break. But 12 in a single row here. And then what this means is that at every screen size that is uh, bigger than the SM breakpoint, which is greater than or equal to 576 pixels, usually you just think about it. Oh, yeah, small screens. Yeah, you don't think about the pixels, but anyway, uh, this class, this column class will be applied there. And this, so I should probably explain what this row does. So this basically, it puts everything in a line. So it's lined up like this. But, and each of these columns appear in the same line. And if this ever goes over 12 columns of width, it will spill out onto the next line, which we'll kind of see here. Also, all these rows, this only works if it's contained inside what's called a container, which containers it's basically any block level element that has the class container applied to it. And there's 2 types of containers in Bootstrap. There's the normal container, which has the width of its content is set. So this is kind of like this is like 2 columns. You can resize the columns a different size. But this whole thing around here is a container. And you can see there's space on either side in a normal container. But in a fluid containers are 100% the screen width all the time. So it always takes up the entire screen, where is the normal container has spaces on either side. And that depends on the screen size. Like if it is a super small screen, then this might be 100% of the screen width. But that changes with the screen size. So we're gonna take a look at these uh, docs. Actually, first I'm gonna show you this little code pen I made, which can help us explain containers a little more. So this is CodePen. I don't know if anybody used CodePen before, but basically it's just a HTML website. Uh, it's a prototyping ground, I guess. And I believe this is on the internet, this link, if you want to look at it. I don't know if you could change it. Please don't if you're, unless you, I think you can fork it. But anyway, what am I doing? I don't want that. All right. So basically, this is a simple Bootstrap website. It's not very flashy. It's just got a few columns on it, and we have this won't work if you don't have in this. So CodePen does this weird stuff where it has all its head stuff up here. So imagine this is the head. So here we imported this would be a CSS link, and then this over here, where'd it go? Well, I had Bootstrap. Basically, you type in Bootstrap, and this is an npm package. Bootstrap has an npm package, so I'm kind of cheating here, but yeah, and basically adds it over here. So it puts it as that, and it imports all the JavaScript you need. All the CSS is just right here, and that you can search in CodePen. You just search. It's also called Twitter Bootstrap because it's made by Twitter. But anyway, yeah, and we don't need this extra part. Whoops. But yeah, so basically only CSS I added here is I put borders around every element. Kind of like if you ever had was it Rob Hanemichael? If you ever had Rob Hanemichael's class, you'll see him do a lot of this in web app development. Just so you could see what's actually going on here. So we're gonna collapse all this. We're going to shove that all down because we only need to see the HTML here. So imagine this is in an HTML tag. The website allows us to just puke stuff onto here. But this is a row inside a container. So this container is what contains everything. Now you see these sides here are there. Now let me open this site in full screen. So if we open the site in full screen, you'll see that there's spaces on either side. That's because it's a normal container. If we go to responsive view, thanks to Chrome, you'll see that it kind of breaks at every breakpoint until it's at this small breakpoint where it's basically there's nothing on either side. And here's essentially fluid. Now, if we change that to fluid, if we go up here, go container dash fluid, save it and reload this page, you'll notice now it takes up 100% of the screen size, and those columns will adjust with it. And you could also do container fluid instead of fluid. You could do container MD, which makes the container fluid until for everything below the MD breakpoint, which I discussed earlier. So if we reload this page now, I think I saved it. No, I didn't. So we stretch it, we stretch it. Okay, it doesn't really show up because I think this screen is smaller than MD. Let's make this SM just so we could really see it. And I gotta reload the page again. Yeah, so here it starts out as a normal container. It breaks to MD or whatever, and then it gets small or it starts becoming fluid. Actually, I think it, whatever. But essentially, this allows you to control when it becomes fluid. We're going to leave it as a normal container for now. This is also a Bootstrap thing. This stands for margin top dash 3, and this is a really useful class. If I take it away, then it's smushed at the top, which I didn't want. So there's a bunch of classes and stuff like that in Bootstrap, which if I go to the documentation, you'll see if you go to layout, not or actually I think this is utilities like border. You'd set a border, which I could have used actually, because instead of the star CSS, but like is it a bunch of cute little tools that you can use. You don't have to use everything. Just use what you need, and I really like that. Let's return that to 3. And this P-3 is also that stands for padding 3. So that's what's giving this all this padding here. Let's focus on these columns though. So right now, I have column 12, which just means have this column take up the whole screen because this is essentially how many columns this column is sized. So normally, if you just do col, it will take up, it will equalize. If you want a column to be the width of a single column, which is kind of confusing when you think about it, like a column, shouldn't that already be the size of a column? But whatever. You could do -1. We save the page and it should shrink. It's not shrinking because that's at the lowest. If we did it at MD, this MD breakpoint 3, we did it here, then we should see a change. See it all squished down to one column size. So that's pretty much how that works. So, and how you usually do it is you have really big column sizes at the small screen sizes, or you usually just use 12 because it should oh no. And then as you get bigger, you reduce how many columns your column takes up, or you might, some cases you might increase it if it gets too small on a big screen. But yeah, I believe you could also do a row. So this is the row class, which is we could copy all this. Also, this div should be. Oh, I'm missing a div actually. That's kind of cringe. All right. So we could copy this row, kind of show 2 rows here, and I'll do what you expect, 2 rows. But what if we made this 12 or something like that? If it's 12, it'll take up the whole screen no matter what. So you can see, and if we go over here, reload the page, of course, as you see, as the screen gets smaller, the number of columns that it takes up can change. Like here, I believe we hit the SM breakpoint, which is this is technically XS, extra small. So this is the extra small breakpoint. When it's extra small, since it's the smallest breakpoint, you could just leave it out. Uh, but yeah, so we've hit extra small and everything comes length 12 and everything goes across because when you're on mobile, you don't really want like these spaces in between here getting in the way, you know? So yeah, and you can also nest rows inside of rows. So you could do like let's change this to your main there. Let's nest this inside your row. I know I'm going a little bit off on uh, rows, but I promise to get to the more exciting stuff later. Uh, and then inside this, you could put a row. Let's just see how that looks. So that should be, where does this end? Let's tab that in so we can see what we're doing here. Let's remove this. All right. That's not quite what I wanted. So what you'd use this for is if you're laying out, like if you wanted a sidebar, let's make this fluid. So let's say you wanted a sidebar. So this first column, let's make this 3, well, it would still be 12 at the bottom breakpoint. Let's make this 3 at medium. So you can see you put all this in there. And then let's have a sidebar over here. Let's bring this up top actually. Make this the sidebar since it's the smaller row or smaller column. So this would be a sidebar over here. It's only 3. And then we make this the remainder. So 3 minus 9 or 12 is 9. And that should, as you can see, it takes up the rest of the page. So in here, this is a nested row, which could be your content or whatever, or you can have something outside of a row, like an H1. Hello. Ah, HTML, like there. You see it. You see how the layout is coming out now. And you notice this doesn't take up all, because it doesn't add up to 12. So we want to change this to maybe 4. Usually you want your columns to add up to 12 so you don't get this awkward blank space. There we go. So you see there how things come together. If you want padding or margin on top, you can do MT3. You kind of space it out. There, this is actually looking somewhat like a website. And if you don't like the size of this, you could change the column over here. This is bugging me how it's not tabbed correctly. Change it to 2 at medium because I think 3 is too big. Oh, I forgot to change this to 10, but there we go. Now it's equal. There we go. Now we have a sidebar and a hello and everything like that. So you can really get creative. And uh, so let's take it to this big page. Let's reload it. You can see how it resizes. So you can see how you can put like the menu at up top here, and then you can have your main content down here. And then it dynamically, once the screen gets big enough, it gets pulled over to the side. So it's really easy to do responsive design this way. And of course, that sidebar, you could rename this div to a side if you want to be all fancy and correct, and it'd still be the same because it's still a block level element. You'll see a lot in the documentation that use the div elements a lot, but sometimes that's not necessarily what you want. Like you want to use mains and stuff, but a main is just a div that's your main, and a side is a div that's on the side. It's not really enforced, but you kind of learn that in Web App 1 if you've taken that class. Again, I'm mentioning uh, that the main is just a div that's named a main. And for that reason, you can use any of these classes or the container class on a div or your main or whatever. Anyway, I'm on a tangent again. So now let's get into some of these components, which is where it gets a little more flashy. So I'm just going to go through the documentation on, I missed the components here. So here right away we see alerts, and a lot of this stuff is really easy to apply. So alerts work is it's just class alert and then how you want your alert to look. If we go to badge, this one's on a span, so that's kind of special. But basically class badge, what it is, and how you want it to look. You want it to look like a secondary badge. Breadcrumb, I haven't actually used this, but you can see there's a lot of little goodies that you kind of just gotta discover. Like this could be useful if you want to have a blog where you want to path back or something. But yeah, you can see class breadcrumb, and if you see all this ARIA stuff, that's just for accessibility, which you should have if you're having a publicly hosted website. But just know this isn't a part of Bootstrap. This is more of a standard accessibility stuff, and they'll always have the accessibility stuff in the documentation. So, but yeah, like this is breadcrumb. This is the breadcrumb item, so it's kind of a sub thing, and you want to look active like this. That makes it this blue. See, this is how these a lot of this stuff you just got to go look for yourself and see. Wow, this uh, I could do this with just this much code, I guess. And a lot of this is just extra stuff like this alt. You know, you should have that, but for bare minimum, there's a lot of this you could just chop off, although you wouldn't be following uh, accessibility standards or whatever. But here's even a carousel. So like when you go to a big site and you want to do this, here's the code, and you could literally just copy and paste this. Like if we could copy that carousel, let's put it in our main here below this row. So here's a div, this div. Let's just paste it in. Oh, that looks ugly there, but of course it's missing an image or whatever. But uh, there we go. You have a working carousel. It's kind of butchered because we're missing assets, but it works. But undo that because that's really ugly. Yeah, I didn't want to do that. Yeah, but the couple of the ones you wanna look at though, especially if you're doing like prototyping, I found is forms. So here's forms. So if you notice that whenever you enter stuff, your email, you have to make a form. Well, usually they look really ugly. Like if I make a new code pen here quick, if I can, like if I just make a form, actually, let's just copy one from this site. And because I don't have Bootstrap imported yet, it will look ugly. Like normally, like it looks really ugly. Like what is this box straight out of the 1940s? Like, look at this submit button. Oh, gross, gross. Well, if we add Bootstrap to this, like if we bootstrap it up, how am I? Where am I? Got to go to settings here. Just type in Bootstrap. And all this is doing again, it's just adding that link to the head, which we don't see. We already see. We don't even have to import the JavaScript. Look how much better that looks. And we could go through the code here of how this works. You see, form is one of those things that always it just detects on its own. But you could do a form group, which you can see it includes like the email address, which is the label, and then the input, which is this email thing right here, and even a little small thing right here that says class form text muted right there. A lot of this is just you can almost copy and paste it like I just did, and it looks beautiful. Like this is a login form right here with the checkbox, and it doesn't look ugly. Another thing I want to look at if you're looking into buttons or colors and stuff is this uh, primary right here. This is basically they have a set color scheme, and uh, primary they have a bunch of other different types of colors like secondary. You can try secondary. If you save that, see it grays out. The submit button. We go danger, which makes it red. If it refreshes, there it is. Danger. Uh, let's see. What was the other ones? There's warning, I think. Yes, warning is yellow, as you see. And this applies to a lot of different elements. Like you can make, if we go back to docs, actually, I think there's like, if we go to buttons, like here's all the different colors you can do with buttons. And you could just make it like a link right here. So it's a button, but it's a link. I mean, all these different things. And that also applies to alerts here. Usually you use JavaScript to make this appear, but all you have to do is apply the classes. That's pretty much all you gotta do is you just go to the documentation, you put this on your side, second monitor or something, and as you go along, you can look up stuff like whatever you need. Uh, yeah, and it's pretty much it. And you can put things in rows and columns. Rows and columns is pretty much the hardest part about Bootstrap, and it's not even, it's pretty fairly intuitive once you pick it up. So yeah, and it's pretty much all I got. I could go through all this documentation here and go through everything you can do. Like, look at this easy tooltip. Wow, it's basically just a goodie bag of wonderful CSS goodies. And the best part of it is I don't have to write a single bit of CSS if I don't want to. There's some stuff where you might want to have CSS, like if you want an outline around everything, that's kind of dumb, or if you want to change the font size or whatever, you can do that still, but uh, I guess that's pretty much all I got for you guys. Any questions on Bootstrap, or if you want ideas, or yeah. Suppose we could go. I could pull up. I want to pull up the computer club code quick. Uh, and see if, yeah, as you can see, like a bunch of this is just you squish and it just magically, like this is 3 columns, like call probably MD3, call MD3, call MD3, and as we get smaller, boom, call SM12. It's the length of the full string. And then as we get up here, there's a way for the nav bar. I should show you the nav bar actually. Nav bar is kind of interesting. The nav bar has a lot of, see, where's the, I want to see like the menu thing. Almost. Oh, we're looking at nav bar. Here we go. So this looks like a whole mountain of code, but really they're just trying to show off everything you can do with the nav bar. Nav bar is one of those things if you want like the menu to work, which I'm trying to find the example they have here. Of course, my screen's too big, so I gotta shrink it to get the menu to show up. Maybe which one of these has the menu? Here it is. You see here, you add nav bar expand and then the breakpoint at which point you want to expand. Uh, that will automatically, if you format a certain way, believe you have the navbar toggler here, which is this button over here, and then collapse navbar collapse. This is everything you have on your navbar, and this is telling it anything outside of this collapse will always appear, and then anything inside this collapse will appear either when the screen is big enough. Whoops. The screen is big enough, or oh, I got my email in the background. Whoops. Anyway, where'd we go? Where'd we go? Or it'll only appear when we have the drop down out. So that's pretty simple. It's pretty easy to pick up. A lot of this is just in the docs. All right, that's all I got for you guys. Any questions? I'll take that as a no. Well, if you ever start using Bootstrap if your own projects, which I highly recommend, maybe not in like Web App 1 when you're learning layouts and stuff like that, because I think you're supposed to actually use the CSS for that. But using this allows you to not worry too much about CSS and still make your sites look good. Pretty much what it is. So, all right. Take that. There's no questions unless you got one, Michael.
Nope, I was just clapping.
Oh, okay. Thank you. All right.